The rain hammered the church roof like accusations I could no longer outrun as I stood in the narthex gripping Catherine's hand so tightly our knuckles turned white. My father's casket gleamed under the stained glass, a final monument to the lies I had built around it, and the pastor's voice already drifted out from inside, promising peace I knew would never come. In 3 breaths the double doors would open, and every relative who had praised my new straight life would watch me burn it all down. 6 months earlier the doctor had delivered the news in a sterile Chicago hospital room: my father Patrick O'Connor, stage 4 pancreatic cancer, maybe 6 months if we were lucky. He had looked at me with those steel gray eyes, the same ones that had built a contracting business from nothing after leaving Ireland, and said, "Lexi, I always wanted to see you settled with a good man, before I go a wife of family the way God intended." My mother had cried quietly in the corner, my sister Emily had nodded like it was gospel, and I had felt the floor tilt beneath me because for 4 years I had been in love with Catherine Hayes, the woman waiting for me in our apartment 20 miles away, the woman whose quiet strength and sharp laugh had become the only honest thing in my life. Catherine taught history at a suburban high school. She wore soft cardigans and kept her dark hair in a neat bun, and she had understood from the first date that my family could never know. We had met in college at a late-night study group. She had corrected my notes on the suffragette movement, and I had fallen so fast it scared me. We kept our life small, quiet dinners in her apartment, weekend hikes along Lake Michigan, whispered "I love yous" in the dark. But Dad's diagnosis changed everything. The family dinners became interrogations: "Where are you seeing anyone, Lexi? You are 28, not getting younger." And every time I dodged I saw the disappointment carve deeper lines into his face. So I made the call to Ryan, my high school friend turned accountant, the safe, dependable guy who had always carried a quiet torch for me. We met at a coffee shop near his office, and I laid it out: no romance, just dates, enough to convince Dad I was on the right path until he passed. Ryan had hesitated, then agreed because he still cared enough to help, and because I promised it would be temporary. The first fake date was dinner at my parents' house in Oak Park, the same split level, where I had grown up with crucifixes on every wall. Ryan wore a button-down and shook Dad's hand too firmly, laughed at his jokes about real men and construction, and I smiled so hard my cheeks ached while Catherine texted me later that night asking how it went, and I lied saying it was fine. Inside I was unraveling. The guilt tasted like metal on my tongue every time Dad squeezed my shoulder and said, "Finally, Lexi, you are making me proud." Catherine tried to be understanding. She said, "I get it, love, this is for him." But her eyes when I left for the second fake date showed the first cracks. We argued in the kitchen of our apartment, the one we had decorated together with plants and bookshelves. "I cannot keep pretending. This does not hurt me, Lexi. Every time you post those photos with him I feel erased." I held her, then breathing in her vanilla shampoo, promising it was almost over. But we both knew the lie was growing roots. The family loved Ryan. They invited him to Sunday Mass. They asked about our future, and Dad started eating more, talking about grandkids, and for a moment I hated how easy the deception sat on their faces. Yet every night after those nights out I would drive to Catherine's place, crawl into bed, and let her hold me while I cried over the woman I was becoming, the daughter who traded truth for a dying man's smile. The tension built slowly like a storm gathering over the lake. Ryan began texting me good morning messages that felt too real, and once at a family barbecue, he pulled me aside and said, "Lexi, I know this started fake, but I am starting to feel things," and I froze because saying no would risk blowing the cover. Catherine saw the text over my shoulder later, and the silence between us stretched until she whispered, "If you need to make this real to keep him happy, then maybe we should stop." I begged her not to leave, promised I would end it soon, but Dad's health took a turn. He was admitted again, and the doctors said weeks, not months. So I doubled down, smiling wider at family gatherings, letting Ryan kiss my cheek for photos while my heart stayed locked in the apartment with the woman who truly saw me. The betrayal felt like a knife. I twisted myself every time I chose the performance over the person I loved, and yet I kept choosing because the alternative was watching my father die, thinking his only daughter was broken in his eyes. By the time the funeral arrived, I had become a stranger to myself, hollowed out by 6 months of careful lies, and the weight of every unspoken "I love you" to Catherine. The church doors swung open, now pulling me back to the present, and I stepped inside, still holding her hand, the relatives turning their heads one by one as the rain outside kept falling like judgment. The pews creaked under the weight of cousins and aunts who had flown in from Boston and Dublin, their whispers already starting as Catherine and I walked down the aisle together. I felt their eyes like needles pricking the back of my neck because for 6 months they had seen only the version of me holding Ryan's arm at hospital visits and holiday meals. Now here I was with her, the woman they had never met, and the air thickened with the scent of incense and suspicion. Flashback hit me hard to the second month of the pretense when Dad had insisted on a family trip to the cabin in Wisconsin, the one with the wooden cross over the fireplace. Ryan had come along, of course, playing the part perfectly, chopping wood with Dad laughing over beers, while I sat on the dock with my phone texting Catherine, "I miss you so much it hurts." She had replied with a photo of her reading in our bed, the same bed where we had spent the previous weekend, tangled in sheets and soft promises, and the contrast tore at me. At the cabin, Emily, my younger sister, cornered me in the kitchen one night. "Lexi, Ryan seems great, but you do not look happy. Are you sure about this?" I had snapped back, "Of course I am sure, mind your business," and the lie burned because Emily had always been the one who could read me better than anyone. Later that night Catherine called and I stepped outside into the cold air, telling her everything was fine while my teeth chattered from more than the temperature. She had said quietly, "Lexi, I am trying to support you, but every time you choose their version of you, I lose another piece of the woman I fell in love with." We had hung up with "I love yous" that felt fragile, and the next morning Dad had pulled me aside saying, "You know, kid, seeing you with Ryan makes all this cancer crap easier to bear." And I had smiled through tears, hating myself for how much I needed his approval. Back in Chicago, the fake dates multiplied. Ryan took me to Cubs games where we posed for selfies that I sent to the family group chat, and Catherine would see them on social media and retreat into silence for days. One evening after a particularly grueling dinner where Dad had toasted to our future, I drove straight to her school and waited in the parking lot until she came out. We sat in my car and I cried, telling her I do not know how to stop this without killing him faster. And she held me saying, "I know, love, but you are killing us in the process." The moral weight pressed down every choice, felt like choosing which heart to break, mine, Dad's or Catherine's. Ryan complicated everything further. He started showing up at my office with flowers, genuine ones. And when I tried to remind him it was pretend, he looked hurt, saying maybe it does not have to be. And for one terrifying moment I wondered if faking it was easier than facing the truth with everyone. The family pressure mounted, my mother planning hypothetical weddings, asking about grandchildren, and each question was another brick in the wall I had built between me and the life I wanted. Catherine and I fought more, the arguments escalating to her saying, "If you really loved me you would find another way," and me yelling back, "You do not understand what it is like to carry their expectations since birth." Yet after every fight we came back together, her forgiveness a quiet miracle that only made my guilt heavier. By month 4 Dad was weaker, spending days in the hospital, and the doctor said the end was closer than we thought, so I pushed the pretense harder, letting Ryan hold my hand in the room while Dad slept and Catherine waited alone at home with takeout and unanswered texts. The betrayal cut deepest when my best friend from college, Sarah, who knew about Catherine, accidentally saw me with Ryan at a restaurant and later confronted me. "Lexi, what the hell are you doing to her?" And I had begged her to keep quiet, promising it was temporary. Sarah had shaken her head, saying, "This is going to explode and you know it." The internal conflict raged nightly. I would lie awake beside Catherine, listening to her breathe, wondering if love could survive being hidden so long, and if my father's happiness was worth the cost of my own soul. The tension coiled tighter as Dad's condition worsened. He started talking about legacy, about me carrying on the family name the right way, and every word reinforced the cage I had locked myself into. Catherine gave me an ultimatum one rainy Tuesday. She said, "Lexi, I cannot do this anymore. If you cannot choose me openly after he is gone, then we are done." And I had promised her I would, but the words felt like another lie even as I said them. The days blurred into hospital runs and family vigils, Ryan becoming almost part of the furniture, while my real life with Catherine shrank to stolen moments in parking lots and late-night calls. I felt myself fracturing, the dutiful daughter, the secret lover, the reluctant actress, all pulling in different directions until I no longer recognized the woman in the mirror. As the funeral mass began, the priest speaking of forgiveness and eternal life, I squeezed Catherine's hand harder, knowing the real test was minutes away. And the price I would pay for truth was only just beginning to reveal itself. The eulogy droned on, but my mind raced back to the night Dad had taken a sudden turn, the ambulance lights flashing against our suburban house as neighbors peeked from behind curtains. I had ridden with him to the hospital, Ryan driving behind us in his own car, the perfect concerned boyfriend, while Catherine had to learn about it through a frantic text from me hours later. In the ICU, Dad had gripped my hand, whispering, "Lexi, promise me you will be happy with Ryan, raise a family the way I did." And I had nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat, because refusing would have been crueler than the cancer. Catherine met me in the hospital parking lot after that visit, her eyes red from crying. We sat on the curb, And she said I am losing you to this Lexi piece by piece. And I had held her face promising after he is gone I will fix everything. But the fixing never came because the next week was Easter, and the family demanded a big dinner. Ryan carved the ham like he belonged there, and my aunts cooed over how good we looked together, while I felt Catherine's absence like a missing limb. The moral dilemma consumed me. Was it right to lie to a dying man if it brought him peace? Or was every fake smile a sin against the love I owed Catherine? Ryan sensed the strain one evening after visiting hours. He pulled me aside in the hallway, saying, "Lexi, I can see this is tearing you apart. Maybe we should tell them the truth." And I had panicked, snapping, "No, you cannot ruin this now." His real feelings surfaced. Then he admitted he had fallen for the role, and for me, and the conversation ended in tears with me begging him to keep playing along just a little longer. Catherine's ultimatum hung over us. She stopped answering some calls, and when we finally met at our favorite cafe, she looked thinner, saying, "I love you, but I cannot watch you erase us anymore." I had driven home that night replaying every moment we had shared. The first time she had cooked me pasta, the nights we danced in the living room to old records, and the guilt nearly choked me. Family confrontations escalated. My sister Emily cornered me again at the hospital. "Lexi, I saw the way you look at your phone when Ryan is not around. Who is she?" And I had lied through my teeth, saying it was work stress. The betrayal deepened when Sarah, my college friend who had sworn to stay quiet, slipped up at a family gathering mentioning Catherine casually, and the room had gone silent, until I laughed it off as an old roommate. Dad had asked, "Who is Catherine?" and I had said, "No one important," my voice steady while my heart shattered. The societal pressure in our tight-knit Irish Catholic community was suffocating. Whispers at church about modern girls and their choices, the subtle judgment from relatives who quoted scripture about family values. I internalized it all, questioning if my love for Catherine was the selfish choice, or if denying it was the greater sin. As Dad slipped into a coma, the doctors said days left. I spent hours at his bedside holding his hand, the machines beeping like a countdown, while Ryan sat supportively on the other side, and Catherine waited in the car outside for stolen minutes. The inner conflict peaked one night alone in the chapel. I prayed for guidance, but the only answer was the image of Catherine's hurt face and Dad's peaceful smile when he thought I was straight. I chose to continue the lie, telling myself the end justified the means. But each day the cost grew higher. Friends distancing themselves, work suffering from my distraction, and Catherine pulling away emotionally. The awakening began slowly in small moments, remembering how Catherine had supported me through my own health scare last year, how she made me laugh when the world felt heavy, and how with her I felt seen completely. Yet the family machine rolled on, planning the funeral details, my mother asking Ryan to be a pallbearer, and him agreeing, because he still believed in the story we had sold. I felt trapped in a web of my own, making every thread a decision that hurt someone, and the tension stretched to breaking as the final days arrived. Catherine and I had one last quiet night before the end. She cooked dinner. We talked about the future if there was one after, and I promised her I would choose us when the time came. She had kissed me softly, saying, "I believe you, Lexi," but the fear in her eyes said otherwise. As the mass continued, the relatives shifting in their seats, I knew the moment of truth was here, the declaration that would either free me or destroy what was left of my world. And the weight of every sacrifice, every tear, every hidden kiss pressed down until I could barely breathe. Dad passed quietly in the early hours 2 days before the funeral, the call coming while I was at Catherine's apartment, wrapped in her arms for the first time in weeks. I had rushed to the hospital alone, Ryan arriving later with coffee and condolences, the family gathering in the waiting room, hugging and crying while I stood numb, realizing the pretense had outlived its purpose. The betrayal hit when my mother pulled me aside, saying, "Your father died happy because of you and Ryan," and I nearly confessed right there, but the words stuck. Catherine had driven me home that night, holding my hand in silence as I processed the loss and the freedom that came with it, mixed with crushing guilt. We spent the next 48 hours planning the funeral logistics, but my mind was on the decision I had made to end the charade publicly. Ryan sensed the shift. He came over to my apartment the day before the service, saying, "Lexi, I know this was fake, but I fell for you anyway." And when I told him I could not continue, he looked devastated, warning me the family would not understand. The confrontation with him was tense. He accused me of using him, and I could not deny it completely, the moral cost of my choices staring back at me. Catherine stayed by my side through the arrangements, her quiet support a lifeline as we chose the readings and the flowers, the white lilies Dad had loved. My sister Emily helped with the obituary, and when she asked about Ryan, I said we were taking time apart, and she raised an eyebrow but let it go. The night before the funeral, I could not sleep, pacing the living room, replaying every lie, every moment of happiness with Catherine that I had sacrificed. She found me at 3 in the morning and we talked for hours about the pain, the love, the fear, and she said, "Whatever you decide tomorrow, I will be there, but you have to be sure." I was sure for the first time, the awakening complete, the realization that hiding had cost me more than any funeral speech ever could. The morning of the service dawned gray and wet, the rain mirroring the storm inside me as we dressed Catherine in a simple black dress. Me in the suit Dad had always teased made me look like a boy. We drove to the church in silence, her hand on my knee. And when we arrived, the relatives were already milling about, asking where Ryan was, and I said he could not make it, the lie tasting like ash one last time. Inside the church, the air was heavy with flowers and grief, the casket closed, now a barrier between the man I loved and the truth I had withheld. As the mass progressed, I felt the eyes on us, Catherine and I sitting side by side, my hand finding hers under the program, the touch grounding me. Whispers started when we did not separate at communion, the relatives noticing the intimacy. The priest invited anyone who wished to speak, and I stood before I could second-guess the decision, my legs carrying me to the podium, the paper with prepared words crumpling in my fist. I looked out at the sea of faces, my mother in the front row, Emily beside her, cousins, aunts, uncles, all waiting for the dutiful daughter to speak. My voice started steady. "Thank you all for coming to honor my father. He taught me about family, about love, about doing what is right even when it is hard." Then the shift, the room holding its breath as I continued, but the right thing for me was never what he imagined. I stepped down from the podium, walked to the pew where Catherine sat, and took her hand, lifting it for everyone to see. "This is Catherine, the woman I have loved for 4 years, the woman who has been my family through all of this." Gasps rippled through the church, my mother covering her mouth, Emily staring wide-eyed, and the outrage built immediately, a cousin shouting, "What is this blasphemy?" I stood firm, my voice rising. "This is the truth. Dad never knew, but I could not bury it with him." The chaos erupted, relatives standing, some leaving in disgust, others demanding explanations, and in the middle of the storm I felt a strange peace, the cost finally paid, the price of every tear, every argument, every sacrifice now visible in their shocked faces. Catherine squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with pride and love as we faced the backlash together, the real beginning of our life without shadows. The church emptied in waves of anger and confusion, some relatives refusing to speak to me as they filed out, my mother sitting frozen in the front pew, staring at the casket like it might offer answers. Emily approached first, her face a mix of hurt and confusion. "Lexi, how long have you been lying to us?" And I told her the whole story, the fear, the love, the cancer, forcing my hand. She listened, tears falling, saying, "I wish you had trusted me. But I understand the pressure Dad put on all of us." My aunts whispered in clusters, scripture verses flying like weapons, and one uncle approached, demanding I apologize for disrespecting the funeral. I refused, standing tall with Catherine at my side, the woman who had waited through months of invisibility now finally seen. The betrayal from the family cut deep. Sarah, my friend who had known all along, hugged me later, saying, "I am proud of you, but this is going to change everything," and it did. Calls stopped, texts dried up, the family group chat silent except for a few messages from distant cousins disowning me. Catherine and I left the church hand in hand, the rain still falling as we drove to the cemetery for the burial, the small group that remained watching us with wary eyes. At the graveside I spoke again, simple words about Dad's strength, his love for family, and how I hoped he could accept me now. My mother approached after the dirt was shoveled, her voice trembling. "Lexi, I do not understand, but I love you and that is what matters." The reconciliation was tentative, slow, but it started there, her hugging Catherine awkwardly, the first crack in the wall. The days after the funeral were a whirlwind of consequences. My job at the marketing firm suddenly had questions about my focus, some clients pulling away after word spread in our conservative circles. Ryan sent a long email saying he was hurt but wished me well, and I replied with apologies for the pain I had caused. Catherine and I moved in together, officially the apartment now a sanctuary of open doors and honest conversations, the love we had protected finally breathing free. Yet the cost remained real, holidays without the big family gatherings, birthdays with empty seats where relatives once sat. I mourned not just Dad but the version of family I had lost, the illusion of unconditional acceptance shattered by my truth. Through it all, Catherine was my rock, planning small trips to the lake, quiet evenings reading together, reminding me that the choice was worth the pain. The awakening continued daily, small moments of freedom like holding hands in public without fear, or posting a photo of us without editing the caption. Friends who stayed became closer, the ones who mattered proving their loyalty. The moral question lingered in quiet moments: had I been right to lie for 6 months, or had the timing of my truth at the funeral been too cruel? I wrestled with it in therapy sessions, Catherine beside me as we unpacked the layers of guilt and relief. The family slowly thawed. Emily visited, first bringing photos of Dad and stories from childhood. Then my mother came for coffee, asking questions about Catherine, listening with cautious openness. The societal prejudice did not vanish overnight. Stares in grocery stores, comments online. But each day we faced them together, stronger. The sacrifices had reshaped me into someone honest, resilient, the woman Dad might have eventually been proud of if given time. Catherine and I talked about the future, marriage, perhaps kids if we chose, and the conversations felt light without the shadow of secrecy. The drama had peaked at the funeral, but the real story was in the rebuilding, the slow mending of bonds, and the celebration of the love that had survived the storm. I visited Dad's grave alone one afternoon, laying flowers and whispering the full truth, finally free to say it all. The wind rustled the leaves like an answer, and I drove home to Catherine knowing the price had been high but the freedom priceless. Months passed and the new normal settled like autumn leaves after the storm. Catherine and I hosted our first small Thanksgiving with Emily and my mother, the table quieter than before, but filled with tentative laughter and honest stories. The betrayals and confrontations of the funeral faded into memory, replaced by gradual acceptance, my mother asking about Catherine's teaching job, Emily inviting us to her new apartment. Yet scars remained, some cousins still absent, holidays with empty chairs, reminders of the cost of my choice. Work stabilized after the initial backlash, my boss acknowledging my talent beyond personal life, and I threw myself into projects that felt authentic now. Catherine proposed on a crisp fall day at the same park from our early dates, kneeling with a simple ring. And I said yes through happy tears, the moment pure and unhidden. We planned a small wedding for spring, close friends, and the family members who had come around the ceremony, a celebration of the love that had endured hiding and revelation. Reflecting on the journey, I saw the pattern of decisions, each one carrying weight, the fake dates, the hospital lies, the funeral declaration, all leading to this place of truth. The internal conflicts had forged strength, the family pressure had tested loyalty, and the societal prejudice had clarified what mattered. Catherine and I built a life rich with shared dreams, weekend getaways to Michigan, quiet nights, cooking the future we had protected now unfolding openly. The moral dilemma stayed with me in late night talks: was faking the relationship a necessary kindness, or a profound betrayal? And declaring at the funeral an act of courage or selfishness in grief? I weighed the pain I caused against the freedom I gained, knowing both were true. Dad's memory lived on in stories we told Emily and Mom, joining in, sometimes smiling at the man he was, even as they accepted the woman I had become. The awakening was complete, no more hiding, no more half-truths, just the full, honest version of me loving Catherine openly. As we stood at the altar months later, exchanging vows with the small group, watching, I felt Dad's presence, somehow a quiet blessing in the breeze. The family that remained had grown in understanding, my mother hugging us both afterward, whispering, "I see how happy you are, and that is enough." The journey had been marked by loss and gain, betrayal and loyalty, every choice exacting its price, but leading to this authentic happiness. Looking back, the girl who had gripped Catherine's hand in the church that rainy day had paid dearly, but gained everything that mattered. The question remains for all of us who face similar crossroads: was standing in my truth at the ultimate moment of loss the right choice? Or did the timing and the pain it caused make me wrong in the eyes of family and faith?